Saudi Arabia should have been satisfied. It had the oil, it had the money, it had the power, and for decades the world kept coming back for the one thing buried under its desert. But then something strange happened. One of the richest oil kingdoms on earth began spending billions to build a future where oil would no longer define it. New cities in the desert, futuristic projects, stadiums, tourism, sports, technology, luxury resorts, global investments. At first it looked like confidence, but behind the shining towers and impossible dreams there was a quieter question. What if the thing that made Saudi Arabia powerful cannot protect it forever? This is the mystery behind the kingdom's new future. Because Saudi Arabia is not just building buildings, it is not just showing off wealth, and it is not simply chasing attention. It is trying to do something much harder. It is trying to turn oil into time. And to understand why, the story has to begin in the place where everything changed, under the sand. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Here, we uncover the hidden wealth behind the world's most successful countries. Because Saudi Arabia's greatest project may not be NEOM, the line, or a city in the desert. Its greatest project may be escaping the very fortune that made it rich. Before oil transformed Saudi Arabia, life in the kingdom looked very different. The land was vast, but much of it was difficult to live in. The desert shaped daily life. Water was precious. Distance mattered. Survival required patience, movement, faith, trade, and deep knowledge of the land. There were holy cities. There were routes of pilgrimage. There were merchants, tribes, families, and communities that understood how to live in a place where nature did not give things easily. But the discovery of oil changed the meaning of the country. Suddenly, what was hidden underground became more powerful than what was visible above it. Oil brought money, but more than that, it brought speed. Roads began to stretch across the desert. Cities expanded. Ports became busier. Airports connected the kingdom to the world. Hospitals, schools, government buildings, housing projects, and modern infrastructure started to grow in places where the old desert life had once moved slowly. Saudi Arabia did not simply become richer. It became strategically important. Other countries needed energy. Industries needed fuel. Ships, trucks, planes, factories, and modern cities depended on the kind of resource Saudi Arabia had in enormous quantities. The kingdom's location, once seen through the lens of desert and religion, became connected to the global economy. Oil did not only change the Saudi economy, it changed the way the world looked at Saudi Arabia. And the country learned a powerful lesson. When the world needs what is under your ground, your voice becomes louder. But there was another truth hiding inside that success. If a country builds so much of its future on one resource, that resource can become both a blessing and a trap. And Saudi Arabia's greatest strength slowly became its greatest question. Many people look at Saudi Arabia and see luxury. They see towers, wide highways, large airports, expensive hotels, royal palaces, and cities rising from the desert. But those images are only the surface. Behind them, there is a machine. That machine is not made of one single oil well. It is made of exploration, extraction, refining, exports, shipping routes, state planning, energy deals, and one of the most powerful oil companies in the world. Saudi Aramco became the great symbol of that machine. Through it, Saudi Arabia did not just sell oil. It converted oil into national strength. Every barrel was part of something larger. It helped fund infrastructure. It supported government revenue. It created influence. It gave the kingdom a central role in the energy system that powers much of modern life. Oil became more than a product. It became a language of power. When prices moved, the world watched. When production changed, markets reacted. When energy demand rose, Saudi Arabia mattered even more. This is why the country's wealth is different from the wealth of a normal business. Saudi Arabia did not only have money, it had something the world needed every day. That is the hidden reason the kingdom became so influential. It was not just rich because oil was valuable. It was powerful because oil was necessary. But machines can create comfort, and comfort can hide risk. For decades, the system worked. Oil flowed. Money came in. Cities grew. The country expanded its ambition. Still, the same machine that made Saudi Arabia strong also made it dependent. And dependence is dangerous when the world begins to change. Because no matter how powerful the machine becomes, there is one question it cannot avoid. What happens when the world starts looking for another engine? Oil does not look dramatic when it sits inside a barrel. It is dark, heavy, quiet, but in the modern world it has moved almost everything. It has fueled cars, trucks, ships, airplanes, factories, plastics, chemicals, construction, farming, trade, and military power. It helped shape the 20th century. It made some countries rise faster, and it made other countries depend on those who controlled it. Saudi Arabia understood this very well. The kingdom knew that energy was not just an economic product, it was a strategic tool. A country with massive energy reserves does not need to shout to be heard. Its influence travels through markets, prices, agreements, supply chains, and global fear of shortage. This gave Saudi Arabia a special place in world affairs. It could sit at the table with the strongest countries because its oil affected them all. It could build relationships with powerful allies. It could influence global energy discussions. It could turn desert resources into international relevance. For many years, that was the center of the Saudi story. The world needed oil. Saudi Arabia had oil, and the kingdom used that position to build one of the most famous examples of resource-based wealth in modern history. But slowly, a new idea began to grow around the world. Governments started talking about renewable energy. Companies began investing in electric vehicles. Some economies started planning for lower emissions. Technology changed. Public pressure changed. Energy strategies changed. Oil did not disappear. It did not stop being important. But the future no longer looked as simple as the past. And for a country whose wealth was tied so strongly to oil, even the possibility of change was enough to create pressure. Saudi Arabia could not wait until the world changed completely. It had to move while it still had the money, the power, and the time. That is where the fear behind the wealth begins. From the outside, Saudi Arabia can look untouchable. The country has money. It has energy. It has global influence. It has modern cities, massive projects, luxury hotels, international events, and a government willing to spend at a scale few nations can match. But wealth does not remove fear. Sometimes it makes fear more serious. Saudi Arabia's fear is not that the money will disappear overnight. The country is still deeply important in global energy, and oil remains a major part of the world economy. The fear is more strategic. What if the future becomes less dependent on oil? What if younger economies grow around technology, tourism, finance, logistics, entertainment, sports, manufacturing, and renewable energy? What if global investors begin to value different things? What if the country waits too long and loses the chance to transform while it is still strong? That is the quiet tension behind the Saudi story. The kingdom is not trying to escape oil because oil made it weak. It is trying to escape oil because oil made it powerful, and that power must be protected before the world changes too much. This is the part many people miss. Saudi Arabia is not only building for beauty, it is building for survival, influence, and identity. The futuristic city in the desert is not just a dream. The new airports are not just buildings. The sports deals are not just entertainment. The tourism campaigns are not just advertising. They are pieces of a larger plan, a plan to tell the world, Saudi Arabia is more than oil. But saying that is easy. Proving it is hard. And that is why the kingdom is spending so much, so fast, on a future that has not fully arrived yet. There is a strange truth about Saudi Arabia's transformation. The country is not rushing because it has no money. It is rushing because it has money now. And that is what makes the situation so interesting. Many countries only try to reinvent themselves after a crisis begins. They wait until industries decline, jobs disappear, debt grows, or investors leave. By then, change becomes harder, slower, and more painful. Saudi Arabia is trying to move before that moment. It is using the wealth of the oil age to prepare for the next age. That is why the kingdom is investing in so many directions at once: tourism, sports, entertainment, technology, logistics, mining, renewable energy, finance, new cities, luxury resorts, cultural projects, global events, international partnerships. To the outside world, it can look like the country is simply spending billions because it can. But the deeper story is different. Saudi Arabia is trying to change the way the world sees it before the world stops seeing oil as the center of everything. It wants tourists to come for experiences, investors to come for opportunity, companies to come for growth, young people to see a future inside the country, global audiences to associate Saudi Arabia not only with oil fields, but with modernity, ambition, and scale. This is not a small adjustment. It is a national rebranding project, an economic transformation, and a race against time happening at the same moment. But every race has risk. Money can begin construction. Money can attract attention. Money can hire experts. Money can open doors. But money alone cannot guarantee that a new economy will work. And that leads to the most ambitious part of the story: the plan to buy a new future. Vision 2030 is the name of Saudi Arabia's Great Transformation Plan. In simple terms, it is a map for a country trying to become less dependent on oil and more connected to other sources of growth. The idea is not small. Saudi Arabia wants to build a more diverse economy. It wants more tourism, more private business, more entertainment, more technology, more investment, more jobs, more global events. more industries that can survive even if oil is not as dominant in the future. This is where the title of the story comes alive. Saudi Arabia got rich on oil, and now it is using that oil money to build something beyond oil. The oil barrel is being turned into airports, stadiums, hotels, futuristic cities, cultural centers, logistics hubs, and investment funds. The past is paying for the future, but a country cannot change its identity only by announcing a plan. It has to make people believe it. That is why the visual transformation matters so much. The buildings are not only buildings. The events are not only events. The new cities are not only places to live. They are signals. They tell investors, tourists, and citizens that the kingdom wants to be seen differently. For decades, the world looked at Saudi Arabia and thought of oil. Now, Saudi Arabia wants the world to look again and think of opportunity. But this transformation is difficult because oil is still incredibly important to the country. The old machine is still funding the new dream. So Vision 2030 is not the story of a country that has already escaped oil. It is the story of a country trying to escape while still holding the thing it wants to move beyond. And nowhere is that ambition more dramatic than in the desert megaprojects. Some countries build new neighborhoods. Saudi Arabia is trying to build symbols of the future. NEOM is one of the clearest examples. It is presented as a futuristic region in the northwest of the country, a place meant to attract technology, investment, tourism, innovation, and global attention. Then there is the Line, the project that became one of the most talked about ideas in the world, a long linear city in the desert, built around a completely different vision of urban life. To supporters, these projects show courage. They show a country thinking beyond what already exists. They make people look at Saudi Arabia and say something huge is happening there. But to skeptics, they also raise serious questions. Can projects this large be completed as imagined? Can they attract enough people, businesses, and visitors? Can the cost be justified? Can a futuristic city become a real economy, not just an impressive image? That is why these mega projects are perfect symbols of Saudi Arabia's transformation. They are bold, they are expensive, they are visually unforgettable, and they carry risk. The kingdom is not just building roads and towers. It is trying to build belief that the country can become a global destination, belief that its future is not trapped underground, belief that the desert can hold more than oil. But the larger the dream, the greater the pressure. If these projects succeed, Saudi Arabia can change how the world sees it. If they struggle, they will show how difficult it is to turn money into a new national identity. And that reveals the biggest question of all. Can a country buy a new future before the old one loses its power? The great irony of Saudi Arabia's transformation is simple. To escape oil, it still needs oil. The money that funds the new airports, the new resorts, the new stadiums, the new industries, the new cities, and the new global image still comes from a system built around energy. That does not make the plan false. It makes the plan urgent. Saudi Arabia is trying to cross a bridge while the bridge is still being built. Behind it is the oil age, the source of its wealth and power. Ahead of it is a future where the country wants to be known for more than what it pulls from the ground. That is a difficult transition. If oil remains strong for many years, the kingdom has more time, more money, and more room to experiment. It can invest adjust, build, fail, try again, and keep moving. But if the world changes faster than expected, the pressure grows. The country would have less time to prove that tourism, business, technology, sports, logistics, and new industries can carry a larger share of the economy. This is why the Saudi story is not only about wealth, it is about timing. The country has a rare advantage. It can fund its transformation with the very resource it wants to depend on less. But it also has a rare challenge. The longer it waits, the harder the change becomes. So the giant oil drop in the desert has two meanings. It represents the source of Saudi Arabia's power, and it represents the clock ticking behind the country's future. The kingdom is not simply asking, how rich can we become? It is asking, what will we be when oil is no longer enough? In the end, Saudi Arabia's story is not just the story of a country that found oil under the sand. It is the story of a country trying to turn that oil into time. The kingdom became rich because the world needed what it had. Oil gave it money, cities, influence, and a seat at the center of global energy. It allowed Saudi Arabia to rise from the desert into one of the most powerful economic stories of the modern age. But the country also understands something important. No source of power stays untouched forever. Technology changes, markets change, politics change, generations change. The meaning of wealth changes. So Saudi Arabia is spending billions not because it has already escaped oil, but because it knows escape takes time. It is building cities because it wants a new image. It is investing in tourism because it wants new visitors. It is entering sports and entertainment because it wants global attention. It is developing new industries because it wants a future that does not depend on one underground resource. This is the clear resolution of the mystery. Saudi Arabia is not running away from oil because oil failed. It is trying to move beyond oil because oil succeeded so much that the country now has a chance to buy a different future. That is the real secret behind the wealth. The oil made Saudi Arabia rich. But the real test is whether Saudi Arabia can use that wealth to become something more. And maybe the largest project in the kingdom is not NEOM, the line, a stadium, a resort, or a shining city in the sand. The largest project is the country itself. Saudi Arabia is trying to rebuild its own meaning before the world changes the value of the thing that made it powerful. It is not just buying buildings, it is buying time. And the whole world is watching to see if time will be enough.